In a quiet corner of the city, she moved through her day with gentle determination. She was a young teacher, passionate about shaping young minds in her modest classroom, her days filled with lesson plans and hopeful smiles. Every morning, she took the same route through the bustling streets, blending into the rhythm of everyday life with unassuming grace. One rainy afternoon, as she hurried down a narrow alley to escape a sudden downpour, fate took an unexpected turn. She wasn't paying much attention, her thoughts on the lesson she'd prepare for tomorrow, when she collided with a tall, imposing figure. He was wrapped in a dark tailored suit, his presence commanding even in the midst of the rain. She stumbled back, apologies spilling from her lips, but she quickly realized this was no ordinary man. He was a Mafia boss, known in the underground circles for his ruthless power and unshakable authority. The contrast between them was stark, her simple cardigan and jeans, humble and unassuming, his sharp features and piercing gaze, exuding danger and dominance. Their collision was brief, yet it left an undeniable impression on both. As she looked up to apologize, she saw something in his eyes, an unexpected flicker of recognition, perhaps even gratitude. Before she could say more, a sudden commotion erupted nearby. A rival gang's ambush had been set up, men emerging from the shadows with weapons drawn. Without hesitation, she watched as the Mafia boss instinctively moved, shielding a young woman from the crossfire. Her heart pounded in her chest, caught between fear and awe. In that moment, she knew her life had just crossed a line she never anticipated. She wasn't just another pedestrian, she was now a witness to dangerous secrets, pulled into a world she'd only read about in stories. And yet, her instinct to help, to protect, made her act. She shouted for him to move, and surprisingly, he listened. Using her quick thinking and the little knowledge she had from her lessons on conflict resolution, she distracted the assailants long enough for him to escape with a few of his men. As they hurried away, the rain washing over them, she wondered if she had made a mistake, if looking back would ever be safe again. But in that fleeting moment of danger, a bond had formed, one born from courage, chaos, and an unlikely act of kindness. And now, she was left pondering, could someone so powerful and dangerous truly change, or was she doomed to be caught in a world beyond her understanding? If you found yourself wondering what happened next, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories like this, and comment below, where are you watching from? Because sometimes, the biggest surprises come when you least expect them, and one simple act of bravery can turn everything upside down. Would you have looked back? In the quiet lull of an ordinary afternoon, she hurried along the city streets, clutching her bag close against the chilly breeze. She was a young teacher, passionate about her students and dedicated to shaping young minds, yet her world was simple, humble. She taught at a modest school, dressed in practical clothes, and moved through her routines with a sense of purpose rooted in kindness and patience. Today, her routine was interrupted, not by a lesson plan or a parent-teacher meeting, but by a chance encounter that would forever alter her perception of the world she thought she knew. It was just past sunset when she took a shortcut through a narrow alley, seeking to avoid the heavier traffic on the main road. The rain was just beginning to fall again, and she hurried, her footsteps quick and uncertain. Suddenly, her attention was caught by a flicker of movement, a flash of dark-suited figures lurking in the shadows. She barely had time to process it before she bumped into someone. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wrapped in an air of undeniable authority. His face was sharp, almost sculpted by coldness, and his dark eyes seemed to pierce through her, assessing. She stumbled back instinctively, eyes wide with surprise and a flicker of fear. She quickly looked away, muttering an apology, but her heart was pounding. She recognized him, an infamous Mafia boss, known to be ruthless, cold, and untouchable. His reputation was enough to make most cross the street to avoid him, yet here he was, right in her path, as if he belonged to a different universe entirely. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Her simple cardigan and jeans, her unassuming presence, against his commanding stance, the aura of danger that clung to him like a second skin. She felt a strange mixture of fear and fascination. She'd read about men like him in books and news reports, but never imagined she'd come face to face with such raw authority. His gaze lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary, an intense, almost scrutinizing glance that seemed to recognize her as something more than just an ordinary passerby. Then, as if summoned by fate, chaos erupted nearby. A rival faction, aiming to ambush him, burst from the shadows, guns drawn, menace in their eyes. Her breath itched, frozen in place as she watched the unfolding ambush. Without hesitation, the Mafia boss moved, instinctively shielding a young woman, a woman who looked terrified, helpless in the crossfire. His cold exterior was momentarily replaced by something else, an almost protective instinct that defied his reputation. Fear prickled at her skin, but so did a strange sense of fascination. She couldn't believe what she was witnessing. This man, so powerful, so dangerous, was capable of such swift, decisive action. The alley echoed with the crack of gunfire, and she saw him raise a hand, signaling his men to retreat. Despite the danger, she found herself shouting, urging him to move, to get out of harm's way. In that instant, something shifted. He looked at her, not with contempt or impatience, but with an intensity that made her feel exposed, vulnerable, yet strangely seen. With a gesture that was almost imperceptible, he nodded to his men, signaling an escape route. The rain slicked the pavement, and the flickering street lamp cast long shadows over their hurried retreat. She watched him disappear into the night, her mind racing. What had just happened? Who was he really? And how could someone so cold and authoritative have a moment of vulnerability, perhaps even a flicker of gratitude, toward her? Her heart still pounding, she realized that her world, so simple, so safe, had just collided with something far darker and more complex. She didn't belong to his universe, not in any way that mattered. She was just a teacher, a woman who believed in hope and kindness, not in power games and deadly rivalries. Yet, in that fleeting moment, she had glimpsed a side of him that went beyond the rumors, a side that might harbor secrets, scars, or even a hint of something more human beneath the cold veneer. As she turned to leave, her mind was filled with questions. Could someone like him change? Or was she destined to be caught in a world she could never truly understand? And yet, amidst her fear and awe, a small, undeniable feeling took root, something that whispered that even in the coldest of worlds, moments of connection could bloom unexpectedly. If you're curious about what happens next, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment below. Where are you watching from? Because sometimes, the most unlikely encounters can change everything, and one brave act can turn the tide of fate. Would you look back? Or would you run? It was a quiet night, but the alley still echoed with the distant sounds of sirens and footsteps. She had hesitated before entering, her heart pounding from the adrenaline of what she'd just witnessed. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and she pulled her coat tighter around her, trying to shake off the lingering fear. As she turned to leave, she caught sight of him, standing there, a tall, imposing figure with a cold, unreadable expression. He was leaning against the wall, eyes distant, as if lost in thought or haunted by something no one else could see. She hesitated, then approached cautiously. "Are you okay?" she asked, voice trembling just a little. His gaze snapped to her, sharp and assessing. "I'm fine," he replied, voice low but steady. But she could see the flicker of pain behind his eyes, something buried deep, hidden beneath layers of control and authority. She furrowed her brow. "You don't look fine. You look like you were hurt back there." "It's nothing," he interrupted, voice edged with a hint of irritation. She took a step closer, feeling the need to understand, to connect. "You're bleeding," she pointed out, noticing a shallow cut on his hand. Without thinking, she reached out, grabbing his wrist gently. He stiffened, but didn't pull away. Instead, he looked at her with a mixture of surprise and something else, vulnerability. "Why are you so concerned?" he asked, voice almost a whisper. Because you're hurt, she said softly, her gaze meeting his. And no one should suffer alone. For a moment, silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken feelings. Then he finally looked away, as if embarrassed by his own weakness. You don't belong in this world, he muttered bitterly. No, I don't, she admitted. But I believe everyone has a right to be seen, even if their world is dark. His eyes lingered on her then, and she saw a flicker of something, regret, perhaps, or longing. It was the kind of look that made her wonder what secrets he kept hidden behind that hardened exterior. As she gently pressed her coat against his hand to stop the bleeding, he spoke again, almost grudgingly. You're different from the others. You see pain where most see only trouble. She blushed slightly, unsure how to respond. Maybe I just believe in the good that's left, even in places like this. A faint smile touched his lips, something small, tentative, and fragile. You're brave, he said quietly. I've learned that sometimes, it's the only thing left. She looked at him, her heart pounding again. There was a raw honesty in his voice, a vulnerability that he tried to hide beneath his cold mask. What's your name? She asked softly. Marco, he replied, almost reluctant. And yours? Emma, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They stood there for a moment longer, amid the rain and shadows, two worlds colliding and beginning to intertwine. For her, he was the mysterious, dangerous man who seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 secrets. For him, she was a flicker of hope, someone who saw beyond his facade and dared to care. The air between them crackled with unspoken attraction, yet neither dared to break the silence. Instead, they shared a quiet understanding, an acknowledgement of their pain, their struggles, and perhaps, a fragile possibility for something more. As Emma gently removed her coat, offering him warmth, she wondered if this was the beginning of something unlikely, an unexpected spark in the darkness. And Marco, for the first time in a long while, felt a faint stir of something he'd long buried, hope. Would they be able to find a way through their worlds? Or would the shadows of his past pull him back into the darkness? Only time would tell. But tonight, amid the rain and secrets, something had shifted. A small, tender spark had been born, one that might someday grow into something impossible to ignore. If you're curious about what happens next, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment below. Where are you watching from? Because sometimes, the strongest connections are born in the most unlikely moments, and even in the darkness, a single spark can start a fire. Would you dare to look closer? The quiet night had settled heavily over the city, shadows stretching long across the deserted streets. Emma had never felt so vulnerable, yet somehow, her heart refused to let go of the strange connection she'd begun to feel with Marco. As they parted that evening, him disappearing into the darkness with a fleeting glance, she couldn't shake the feeling that their worlds were colliding in ways either of them could control. But the moment of fragile peace was short-lived. The next day, whispers began to circulate. Rumors spread like wildfire, about the girl who had dared to approach the notorious Mafia boss, about the strange encounter that defied everything she'd ever known. It wasn't long before Emma realized that her simple life as a teacher was about to be turned upside down. The school she loved, her colleagues, her students, each one started to notice her distracted gaze, her distant silence. And she knew she couldn't ignore the storm brewing just beyond her door. Meanwhile, Marco was feeling the weight of his own truths pressing down on him. His reputation was a fortress built on fear and silence. The past he desperately tried to bury, the violence, the betrayals, the enemies lurking in the shadows, was catching up. It wasn't just gossip or rumors. It was something darker, more dangerous. Rumors of enemies closing in, of rival factions seeking to eliminate him once and for all. And now, Emma had become entangled in it all. Her simple act of kindness had ignited a chain of events that could destroy them both. Their relationship, once a fragile spark of hope amid chaos, was now a risk so great that even thinking about it made her stomach churn. The world wouldn't accept their connection. To everyone around her, her colleagues, her friends, she was just a young teacher, innocent and unworldly. But Marco? He was a marked man, feared, hated, and hunted. His enemies would see her as a weakness, a vulnerability to exploit. And her family? They would never understand. Her mother's worried voice echoed in her mind, warning her to stay away from such dangerous men. But Emma couldn't forget the look in Marco's eyes, the pain, the vulnerability, the secret that he kept hidden behind his cold exterior. It was as if she saw through his armor, glimpsing the man beneath, the man haunted by ghosts from his past, desperate to protect what little he had left. Yet, no matter how deep her feelings ran, she knew the truth. They couldn't escape the world's judgment. His enemies wouldn't hesitate to use her as a pawn, and her own life could become a target just by standing by him. And Marco was painfully aware of it too. One evening, as he sat alone in a dimly lit room, he stared at a photograph, an old, worn picture of someone he'd lost long ago. His jaw clenched, the pain flickering behind his eyes. The past was never truly gone, and now it threatened to tear everything apart. He thought about Emma, her kindness, her innocence, and he wondered if he could really protect her from the storm that was coming. Could they hide away, escape the shadows? Or was their love destined to be a tragedy, doomed from the start? The reality was brutal. For them to be together, they'd have to face enemies far more dangerous than gossip or disapproval. They'd have to confront a world that saw their bond as a threat, a world that would stop at nothing to keep its secrets buried and its power intact. The stakes had never been higher. Their love was no longer just a forbidden spark, it was a battle for survival. Emma's courage was tested as she approached Marco once more, her resolve hardened by the knowledge that their future might depend on daring the impossible. But she also knew the truth: the world wouldn't let them be. Not without a fight. For Marco, the decision was clear: protect her at all costs, even if it meant risking everything. Because some secrets are too dangerous to keep hidden forever, and love, even in the face of insurmountable odds, might be the only thing worth fighting for. Now, standing on the edge of this perilous line, they both understood one thing: if they wanted to stay together, they'd have to face the storm head-on. No matter what the world says, they'd have to decide: will they run and hide, or stand and fight for what their hearts already knew? If you're curious about what happens next, remember to like, subscribe, and comment below. Where are you watching from? Because sometimes, the greatest stories unfold when love and danger collide, and the only way forward is to face the truth, no matter how dark it gets. Would you risk everything for love? The night air was thick with anticipation, yet neither Emma nor Marco could deny the pull drawing them closer. After that dangerous encounter in the alley, their worlds had become tangled in ways neither had expected. Every stolen glance, every lingering look had become a silent promise that defied the chaos threatening to tear them apart. Despite knowing the risks, her reputation, his enemies, the impossible odds, they couldn't stay away from each other. It was as if fate had woven their paths together, and no matter how dangerous that was, either dared to break free. Emma found herself drawn to Marco's presence whenever she could. It was in the way he looked at her when he thought no one was watching, an intensity that made her heart race. It was in the quiet moments when they simply stood close, the space between them filled with unspoken words. His hand, rough yet tentative, brushed against hers during a fleeting moment, igniting a spark she knew she shouldn't feel. But she couldn't help it. The more they tried to keep their distance, the stronger the attraction grew. It was love against all the rules, a dangerous game where the stakes only got higher with each passing day. One evening, under the cover of darkness, they found themselves alone in a secluded spot, an abandoned rooftop overlooking the city's shimmering skyline. The city's pulse thumped below, but up here, it was just the two of them, suspended in a fragile bubble of stolen time. Emma's breath caught as Marco stepped closer, his gaze searching hers. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered, voice husky with emotion. I know, she replied softly, her cheeks flushing. But I can't stay away. His eyes flickered with a mixture of longing and pain. You're risking everything, for me. For us, she corrected, voice trembling. Because I feel like I've never felt before. Like I'm finally alive. Marco reached out, gently brushing her hair from her face, his fingers trembling slightly. You don't understand what you're getting into, he said, his voice strained. This world, my world, doesn't forgive mistakes. It devours anyone who gets too close. She looked up at him, her heart pounding. Maybe I don't care. Maybe I've spent my whole life trying to do what's right, but with you, everything feels different. Real. Like I'm finally living. For a moment, the world around them seemed to fade away. Their eyes met, and in that shared silence, the barriers shattered. Marco leaned in, hesitating just a breath away from her lips. Emma, he whispered, voice filled with longing and regret. This isn't safe. We're playing with fire. Then let's burn together. She whispered back, her voice steady despite the trembling in her chest. Their lips met in a tentative, desperate kiss, an act of rebellion, of love defying all odds. It was raw, tender, and filled with unspoken promises and fears. In that moment, nothing else mattered. The danger, the secrets, the looming threat of their worlds colliding, none of it could overshadow the truth they both knew in their hearts. They couldn't deny what they felt, no matter how forbidden it was. The world might see them as enemies, as opposites destined to clash, but in each other's arms, they found a rare refuge. A love so fierce that it defied the rules, setting fire to the boundaries that tried to keep them apart. As they broke apart, breathless and trembling, Emma clung to him, knowing that this stolen night could change everything. Their love was a secret, a dangerous, beautiful secret. And even knowing the risks, either could turn away. Because sometimes, love against all odds is the only choice worth making. And in that moment, they both understood. No matter what the world said, they wouldn't let go. Not now, not ever. Because some rules are meant to be broken when love is the only truth that matters. If you're captivated by this forbidden romance, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. Where are you watching from? Because sometimes, the greatest love stories are born when hearts dare to defy the impossible. Would you risk everything for love? The night shattered with the deafening roar of an explosion that reverberated through the alleyway, casting flickering shadows on the rain-soaked pavement. Emma's heart stopped for a moment as debris rained down, and the air filled with the acrid smell of smoke and betrayal. In that chaos, she saw him, Marco, standing amidst the wreckage, his face grim and determined, yet vulnerable. It was a trap, an ambush designed to crush him, to expose his secrets, to force his hand. But Emma had seen enough to know that this was no ordinary attack. It was blackmail, a calculated move to force him into surrender. Suddenly, figures emerged from the shadows, armed and ruthless, their intentions clear. They had discovered his secret, his involvement in the Mafia, and now they threatened to destroy everything, including her. Emma's instincts kicked in. She pushed her way through the chaos, grabbing Marco's arm, pulling him away from the flames and the men closing in. Run! She commanded, voice trembling but firm. We can't let them get you. But Marco hesitated, his eyes burning with conflict. His world, his power, all of it was at stake. Giving up his empire wasn't just a matter of pride, it was survival. Yet, in that moment, with the smoke billowing around them and enemies closing in, the choice was clear. He looked at her, at the woman who had risked everything to save him, and a flicker of defiance ignited within. Run! Emma begged again, clutching his sleeve. I'm not leaving you. Her voice cracked with emotion. You're more than just your power. You're someone I believe in. I'll stand by you, no matter what. Marco's jaw clenched. The weight of her words, her unwavering resolve, pressed against his doubts. He knew the truth. The danger was extreme, and her life was now intertwined with his in a way he hadn't anticipated. If he stayed, he risked losing everything, even her. But if he surrendered his throne, he'd be giving in to the enemies, surrendering the very part of himself that defined him. He looked at her, eyes dark with conflict. "If I walk away from this," he murmured, "it's not just my empire I'm giving up. It's my identity. My purpose. And I can't." "You can," Emma interrupted, stepping closer. "Because I believe in us. I believe in the person you are beneath the power. You don't have to choose between your life and me. We can find a way, together." A thunderous explosion erupted nearby, and Marco's face hardened. His mind spun with the stakes, his reputation, his control, her safety. The enemies had already exposed him enough. He was at the brink of losing everything. Yet, for her, he considered the impossible, walking away from it all, from the darkness that had consumed him for so long. He reached out, gripping her hand tightly. "If I do this," he whispered, voice low and fierce, "it's not just for me. It's for us. I'll give up everything, my power, my name, if it means you're safe. Because without you, none of it matters." Emma's eyes shimmered with tears but shone with unwavering resolve. "Then that's what I'll stand for. I'll stand by you, through whatever comes. Because love isn't about power or titles. It's about loyalty, about fighting for what's right, even if it costs us everything." The enemies were closing in, their shadows creeping closer. Marco made a decision. With a final glance at the burning wreckage behind them, he pulled her into his arms. "We're running," he said, voice resolute. "And we'll face whatever comes together. Because I won't let anyone take you away from me, no matter the cost." As they disappeared into the rain, into the darkness, their bond was tested to its limits. Betrayal had revealed secrets, an attack had separated them in body, but not in spirit. Marco's choice was made. He would sacrifice his empire for her. Emma proved she was willing to stand by his side, no matter the danger. Their love had been forged in fire, and now, more than ever, they knew that sometimes, the greatest strength comes from risking everything for the one you love. The rain poured relentlessly, turning the city's dark streets into a slick, shimmering battleground. Shadows danced beneath flickering streetlights as Emma and Marco faced their final challenge, an imminent showdown with those who sought to destroy everything they had fought for. The ambush that had erupted earlier was no accident. It was a betrayal, a calculated strike by enemies desperate to tear them apart and expose their forbidden love. Now, standing amidst the chaos, they knew that their choice had to be decisive: either fight together and defy the world, or surrender to the impossible odds and lose everything. Marco's jaw clenched as he looked at Emma. Her eyes, fierce despite the danger surrounding her, told him she was ready to fight for what they shared. She had proven her courage time and again, risking her reputation and safety to stay by his side. And now, their love was put to the ultimate test: either they would stand united and face the storm, or be torn apart forever. He reached out and took her hand, feeling her trembling but unwavering grip. "We only have one shot," he whispered fiercely. "We're in this together, no matter what happens." Emma nodded, her voice steady. "If we're going to do this, we do it as one. No backing down. For us." Her words ignited a fire inside Marco, a reminder that their love wasn't just forbidden, it was their greatest strength. Suddenly, from the shadows emerged the traitor, one of Marco's trusted men, now turned against him, wielding a gun aimed with deadly precision. His face was cold, eyes devoid of loyalty. "Marco," he sneered, "you thought you could hide your weakness? Your love? It's your downfall. And it ends tonight." The room seemed to freeze as the traitor pulled the trigger, but Marco reacted instinctively. With a swift move, he pushed Emma behind him and lunged forward, tackling the traitor just as the shot rang out. The bullet missed Emma by inches, embedding itself into the brick wall behind her. Marco's fist collided with the traitor's jaw, and a brutal fight ensued, a clash of wills, of loyalty, of love versus power. Emma, caught between fear and resolve, grabbed a nearby pipe and swung it with every ounce of strength she had. Together, they fought not just for themselves, but for their forbidden love that refused to die in the face of darkness. The traitor was strong, but their unity was stronger. They fought with everything they had, kicks, punches, and desperate cries, until he was finally subdued, lying defeated on the wet pavement. Panting and bloodied, Marco looked into Emma's eyes, filled with awe and relief. "We did it," he whispered, voice hoarse. "Because we're willing to fight for us." But the danger was far from over. The remaining enemies, realizing their plan had failed, closed in, guns drawn and faces twisted with rage. Emma clutched Marco's arm. "We can't let them take us apart now," she said, voice trembling but determined. "This is our moment. Our fight. We prove that love, our love, is stronger than all of their schemes." Marco nodded, pulling her close. "Then let's make it count." With a sudden surge of courage, he stepped forward, facing the enemies head-on. "You want to break us? Fine. But love isn't something you can destroy with threats or violence. It's what makes us human. What keeps us alive." His voice rang out, loud and unwavering, as Emma stood beside him, ready to face whatever came next. Together, they charged into the fray, fighting not just for survival but for the right to love in a world that wanted to keep them apart. Every punch, every shot fired was a testament, proof that they would not give up, that their forbidden love was worth every risk, every sacrifice. The battlefield was chaotic, but amidst the chaos, Emma and Marco found clarity. Their bond was unbreakable, forged in fire and tested in blood. As they finally pushed back their enemies, standing victorious but exhausted, they knew the battle was won, but the war for their love would never truly end. In that moment, they made a silent vow: no matter what the future held, they would fight side by side. Because love isn't about avoiding danger, it's about standing firm through it all, fighting for each other, even when the world says they shouldn't. And as the rain washed over them, mingling with their tears and sweat, Emma and Marco knew that their love, despite all odds, had proven itself. They had fought for it, bled for it, and now they would never look back. Because true love isn't just forbidden, it's worth every sacrifice. And together, they would face whatever darkness lay ahead, united and unbreakable. The rain had finally begun to diminish, leaving behind a silence that felt almost sacred after the chaos. Emma stood on the edge of the quiet street, her heart pounding in her chest. The danger had passed, but the storm inside her was just beginning. Beside her, Marco looked out into the city's distant lights, a heavy silence between them. For so long, he had been the Mafia boss, trapped by a life of violence, power, and secrets. But in that moment, something had shifted. Watching her risk everything to save him, Emma had shown him a different path, a path not paved with blood and danger, but with hope, love, and perhaps, redemption. Marco took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his choices pressing down on him. For years he had believed that his world was unchangeable, that power was everything, and love was a weakness. But Emma had proven him wrong. Her bravery, her unwavering faith in him, had opened his eyes to a new possibility. A life beyond the shadows, a chance for a fresh start. Now, standing there under the dim streetlights, he knew what he had to do. Turning to Emma, he reached out, taking her hand gently. "I've spent so long running from who I am," he said softly, voice thick with emotion. "But I realize now that I don't want to live in fear anymore. I want to be the man who fights for love, your love, and for a better future." Emma looked up at him, tears shimmering in her eyes. "It's never too late," she whispered. "You can leave that life behind. You can choose a new beginning." And so, Marco made a vow that night, one not just spoken but felt deep within his soul. He would renounce his dangerous life, step away from the violence, and seek redemption. It wouldn't be easy, The shadows of his past still lurked, threatening to pull him back, but with Emma by his side, he felt stronger than ever. She had become more than just a savior, she was the hope that now fueled his every step. Together, they began to build a new future. Emma, inspired by Marco's courage, decided to create a life rooted in genuine happiness, away from fear and danger. She found a new job, a place where she could teach children, nurturing their dreams instead of watching for threats. With her love for Marco guiding her, she started to believe that love could heal even the deepest wounds. And Marco, leaving behind his old identity, dedicated himself to making amends. He sought out ways to help those he once hurt, to protect the innocent, and to give back to the community that had once been a part of his dark world. It wasn't just about escaping his past, it was about forging a future built on love, hope, and redemption. The days that followed were filled with small victories, Emma's classroom filled with laughter and light, Marco volunteering at local shelters, working tirelessly to rebuild trust and integrity. Their love grew stronger with each passing moment, proving that love isn't just about grand gestures, it's about the quiet strength to change, to forgive, and to believe in better days ahead. As they stood together one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky with hues of gold and pink, Marco gently wrapped his arms around Emma. "From now on," he whispered, "our story is ours to write. No more fear, no more shadows. Just love and hope, because that's all we need to start anew." Emma smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Love conquers fear," she replied softly. "And together, we can face anything." Their journey wasn't over. There would still be challenges, scars from the past, and doubts to overcome. But in that moment, they knew one thing for certain: their love had given them the strength to begin again. And no matter what the future held, they would face it hand in hand, heart to heart. Because sometimes, the greatest victory is not about winning the fight, but about choosing love over fear, hope over despair. They had found their new beginning, one rooted in love, courage, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. What does love mean to you? And would you have the courage to start over, no matter the scars of the past? Remember, sometimes, all it takes is one act of bravery to change everything.